The ban was, technically, for safety reasons. This was the language the Verith Racing Commission used in their formal ruling, which was issued 6 weeks after the Concordance's first human competitor. One Dara, a Mensa, completed the Kareth Invitational in a time that the Commission described. In the careful phrasing of an institution that had not anticipated the result as anomalous, the ruling said, following review of the Kareth Invitational results and subsequent analysis of human physiological parameters, the Verith Racing Commission has determined that human participation in class a circuit events presents unacceptable risk to both human competitors and other participants. Given the documented incompatibility between human biological tolerances and the environmental conditions of Class A course design, this language was accurate in its narrow, technical sense. Class A Verith circuit courses were designed for species with higher baseline tolerances than humans possessed. The atmospheric conditions in certain sectors were outside human comfortable range. The gravitational variation on some course segments exceeded human optimal parameters. The courses were, in the literal engineering sense, not designed for human bodies. The language was also, in the assessment of approximately everyone who read it and understood what had actually happened at the Kareth Invitational, not the real reason for the ban. The real reason was the time. The Kareth Invitational had been run for 31 years. The course record had been held for the past 8 years by the Verith champion Sorenvel, whose time had been widely described as the practical limit of what the course permitted given the physics of the route. Sorenvel was a 3-time commission champion, sponsored by the largest racing consortium in the outer systems, and broadly understood to be the best competitive runner in the known circuits. A Mensa had beaten his time by 4 minutes and 17 seconds on her first run of the course, having never seen it before. The Commission's safety review, which had been completed in 6 weeks, rather than the standard 14, had found no safety violations in a Mensa's run. She had completed the course. She was uninjured. By every available metric, the course had not presented unacceptable risk to her specifically. The ruling did not address this. It addressed species-level parameters and the theoretical risk to a general human population rather than the documented performance of the specific human who had run the course. This was, several Commission observers noted privately, an unusual methodological choice for a body that typically based safety decisions on actual data. Dara, a Mensa, read the ruling in the Kareth Field Station's competitor lounge, surrounded by her support crew, which consisted of her coach, her physiologist, and her younger brother Quaim, who was there primarily for moral support and secondarily because he had never seen a Class A circuit and had asked nicely. She read the ruling twice. Then she set it down and said, with the specific quality of someone who had already reached a conclusion before they finished reading, "When's the next open event?" The Verith Open, her coach said. 12 weeks. She nodded. Good. That's enough time. Her physiologist said, "They've banned human participation. The ruling covers all Class A events." "I know," she said. He looked at her carefully. "What are you thinking?" She looked at the ruling, then at the course map that was still displayed on the wall of the competitor lounge. The Kareth Invitational route with its elevation changes and atmospheric sectors and gravitational variance zones marked in the colors that the Commission used for competitor briefings. The ban covers registered competitors in Class A events, she said. She paused. "I want to know what it covers outside of registered competition." Dara, a Mensa, had grown up in Accra, which was a city, and in the hills north of Accra, which were not. Her father had been a competitive distance runner before his knees had decided they were done with competition. He had dealt with this by continuing to run recreationally, which meant that Dara had grown up running with him. In the hills, in conditions that the running community called training and that her father called just going out. The distinction her father made between training and just going out was not a casual one. Training was running in service of a goal, a time, a distance, a competition. Just going out was running in service of understanding what running was, what the body did when it was asked to do difficult things for extended periods, what the mind did when the body was tired and the terrain was hard and the question was no longer how fast can I go, but what am I capable of? Her father had believed, with the conviction of someone who had tested the belief extensively. That competition came after understanding. That times came after you knew what running felt like from the inside. That the course record was downstream of something much more basic. He had passed this on to Dara the way he had passed most important things on to her, by doing it alongside her for years, until it was part of how she understood the world. She had run her first competitive race at 14 and had been confused, briefly, by the discovery that many of the other competitors were running against the clock or against each other in a way that seemed to put the competition before the running. She had won the race and not fully understood why until a few years later, when she understood that she had been running the terrain and the other competitors had been running the distance, and that these were different activities that happened to look the same from the outside. This was the thing she brought to Class A circuit racing that the Commission's safety review had not been designed to measure. Not human physical parameters. Understanding of what running was. The Verith Open was the second largest Class A event on the circuit calendar. 47 registered competitors, 16 species. A course that covered 63 kilometers of varied terrain across 3 distinct environmental zones. It was held on the planet Verith itself, which was the Commission's home world and which had a specific gravity approximately 20%, higher than human standard, an atmospheric composition that was human breathable but at the low end of comfortable oxygen partial pressure, and a surface temperature range that required thermal management gear for human competitors. Since human competitors were banned, none of this was officially relevant. Dara, a Semensa, had been at Verith for 11 days before the Open, which was not a violation of any Commission ruling because she was not a registered competitor. She was, on paper, a guest of the Concordance Observer mission, which maintained a presence at major circuit events as part of the Concordance's Sporting Cultural Exchange program. She had spent 11 days learning the course not from maps, not from the competitor briefing materials which the Observer mission had access to, walking it, every kilometer of it, in sections, in the 11 days before the event, in the full environmental conditions of the course, with the specific attention that years of running had taught her to pay to terrain. Quain walked with her sometimes. He was less interested in the technical analysis and more interested in the views, but he was good company and he asked the right questions. "What are you looking for?" he said, on day 4, as she stopped at a course junction that the briefing materials described as a decision point where competitors chose between a direct route and a longer route with better footing. She was looking at the junction with the same quality of attention she had been bringing to every section where the course wants you to go, she said. He looked at the junction. The direct route is right there. The direct route is what the course expects, she said. She looked at the longer route, then at the terrain on either side of both options, then at the elevation ahead. She was silent for a moment. Most courses are designed with an intended line, the fastest competitor line through the design geometry. She paused. But terrain doesn't always agree with the intended line. Sometimes there's a different line that the designers didn't see because they were designing for the expected competitor. Moving at the expected speed with the expected physical approach. What kind of line? She pointed at a slope to the left of both marked routes. One that's faster if you're moving differently than expected, He looked at the slope. That's not on the map. No. She spent another 20 minutes at the junction. Then she started up the slope, which was steep and unmarked and had no obvious top from where they were standing. The slope went up for 400 meters and came out at a point that was, by Quame's subsequent calculation, approximately 6 minutes of running ahead of where the longer marked route reached. Dara stood at the top and looked back down. "The course wants you to go right," she said. "The terrain will let you go left." Quame looked at the 6 minutes. He thought about the 4 minutes and 17 seconds at the Kurith Invitational. He said, "How many of these are there?" She looked at the course map on her field unit, against what she had seen on the ground over for days. "Enough," she said. The Verith Open began at 0700 on a clear morning. 47 registered competitors crossed the start line. Dara, a Semensa, was not among them. She crossed the start line at 0702, 2 minutes after the registered competitors had gone. Wearing the standard observer mission identification that made her presence on the course perimeter technically permissible, she was carrying the thermal management gear that the atmospheric conditions required. The food and hydration for a 63-kilometer effort, and the course map that she had annotated over 11 days to show the lines that the terrain permitted but the course design had not anticipated. She was not in the race. She was not registered. She was not competing. She was just going out. This was, from the Commission's perspective, an unanticipated situation. The ban covered registered competitors in Class A events. The Commission's legal framework, which had been designed to manage competition, had not been designed to manage someone who was simply running the same course at the same time, outside of the competition's formal structure. The Commission became aware of the situation at the 20-kilometer mark, when the course monitoring system, which tracked all movement on the course for safety purposes, flagged an unregistered transponder moving at a speed that was inconsistent with observer mission personnel, who were expected to be stationary at observation points. The Commission coordinator pulled up the transponder data. The unregistered transponder was running. Not jogging. Running. Achapasi that interpolated against the course map suggested a completion time that the coordinator looked at for a moment before calling her supervisor. Her supervisor looked at the data and called the Commission director. The Commission director looked at the data and said several things that the monitoring room's recording system captured and that were subsequently reviewed by the Commission's legal staff, who concluded that several of them were technically accurate as emotional expressions, but inadvisable as formal statements of Commission policy. Then he said, "What is she doing?" "She's running the course, sir." The coordinator paused. "She's not in the race. She's just running the course. Can we remove her?" The legal staff was consulted in real time. The legal staff said, "The ban covers registered competitors. She is not a registered competitor. She is on the course during an open event, which is they paused technically within the bounds of the Observer Missions Access Provision, which allows observer mission personnel to be present in course areas during competition for monitoring purposes." The director looked at the transponder data, which was still moving. "She's not monitoring," he said. "No, sir. She's running." A silence. "Can we stop her?" The legal staff said. "On what grounds?" The director did not have an immediate answer to this question. At the 40-kilometer mark, the course monitoring data showed something that caused the Commission's coordination room to go very quiet. The unregistered transponder was ahead of the race leader, not slightly ahead. Significantly ahead. 7 minutes ahead of Sorenvel, who was currently in first place among the registered competitors and who was running on pace for what the pre-race analysis had projected as a likely course record. The monitoring coordinator said, carefully, She's taking different lines. The supervisor looked at the data. What lines? She's not following the course markers. She's running the terrain directly in several sections. She paused, tracing the transponder's path against the course map. This section here, she should have gone around the ridge. She went over it. That's 400 meters of steep, vertical, but it cuts 6 minutes off the marked route. She traced further. Here she crossed the stream at an unmarked point that's shallower than the marked crossing. And here she paused. I don't even know what this line is. There's no trail there. The director leaned over to look. She found it on the ground. The supervisor said, "She's been here." She looked at the director. 11 days. She walked this course for 11 days before today. He looked at the 40-kilometer mark data. She's not racing, the supervisor said quietly. She came out here and ran the course she found on the ground. The race just happens to be going on at the same time. The commission's head of course design had been standing at the back of the monitoring room. He had been called in when the first anomaly was flagged. He was now looking at the transponder path with an expression that was several things simultaneously: professional discomfort, reluctant recognition, and something that might, in a different context, have been respect. He said, "Those lines are real. I know the ridge section. We looked at it in design and concluded it was too steep for most competitor profiles." He paused. "It's not too steep. We just didn't think anyone would use it. Why not?" The supervisor said, "Because it's efficient only if you approach it with significant speed and have the specific combination of leg strength and vertical tolerance to maintain pace on that grade." He paused. "Most Class A competitors can't. The energy cost exceeds the time savings. But she can." He was quiet. "Humans," he said slowly, "have a specific adaptation profile for steep grade running that's unusual in galactic comparative physiology. It's related to bipedal locomotion on an irregular gravity world. They evolved running on a surface that varied significantly in gradient. The biomechanical efficiency on steep grades is..." He stopped. He had just said it. He looked at the transponder data. She found every section where that adaptation gives her a line the course designers didn't account for. 11 days, the supervisor said. He nodded. The director looked at both of them. Then he looked at the transponder data, which was still moving, still ahead of Sorenvel, still finding the terrain's lines, with the specific attention of someone who had spent 11 days learning to read them. He said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. Dara crossed what would have been the finish line at 0934, not the race finish, which had a formal structure and timing gates and officials in the Commission's presentation apparatus. She crossed the geographic point where the finish line was located, which was a plaza at Varath Circuit Center, and she stopped, and she looked at her field unit, which showed her elapsed time. Then she looked at the course time she had set. Her time was 11 minutes and 43 seconds faster than the course record held by Soren Vel, which was the record that had been described as the practical limit of what the course permitted. She stood in the plaza and breathed. Quaim, who had been tracking her transponder data from the observer mission viewing area, and who had sprinted to the plaza when her projected finish time became clear, arrived approximately 30 seconds after she did, slightly out of breath. He looked at her time. Then he said, with the specific quality of someone who has watched their sibling do something for their entire life and has just understood it for the first time, "Dad is going to want to know about this." She looked at him. She was breathing hard, which was correct. She was also, he noted, not otherwise distressed. Her bearing was the bearing of someone who had gone somewhere they understood. She said, "Do you have food? I'm hungry." He did. He had learned, years ago, to always have food when Dara came back from running. They sat in the plaza and Dara ate, and they waited for the registered competitors to finish. Sorenvel finished at 1007, which was a personal best and a new Class A record for the Verith Open among registered competitors. He crossed the finish line with the specific quality of someone who had run very well and knew it. Then someone told him the unregistered time. He looked at the plaza, where a human in observer mission identification was sitting on the ground eating something, and he looked at the time, and then he went over. Dara looked up at him. He was very tall, which was a Verith characteristic, and he had the build of someone who had been competitive at the highest level for many years, which he was. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "How?" She looked at the course map on her field unit, which was annotated with 11 days of ground notes. She held it out to him. He took it and looked at it. He looked for a long time, running through the annotated lines, the slopes and stream crossings and ridge routes that were not on the Commission's official course materials. He looked at the ridge section at kilometer 42. "I didn't think anyone would run that," he said. She said, "It's the fastest line." He was quiet for a moment. "How long did you spend finding these?" 11 days. He looked at her, of walking the course and running the sections, she said, "to test the times." He thought about this. Then he said, "You weren't in the race today?" "No." "Why not?" She looked at him steadily. "You know why not." He did. He was quiet again. "The Commission banned humans from Class A competition," he said finally, in the tone of someone reviewing a decision he had not made but was associated with. Yes. His time, the course record he had set today among registered competitors, was 11 minutes and 43 seconds slower than the unregistered time that was sitting on the field unit between them. He said, "I'm going to file a formal inquiry with the Commission." She looked at him. "The course record is supposed to reflect the fastest completion of this course," he said. "Right now it doesn't." He paused. "That's a problem for the Commission, not just for you." She considered this. "Why does it matter to you?" He thought about it. "Because I'm not interested in holding a record that doesn't mean what records are supposed to mean," he said. He set the field unit down between them. "I've been running this circuit for 11 years. The records mean something because they're honest." He paused. "Yours is honest. Mine, today, is the fastest registered completion of a course that has a faster unregistered completion." He looked at her. "That's not a record. That's a category." Dara looked at him for a moment, then at the course map. "The ban won't change quickly," she said. "No," he agreed. "But the inquiry will be on record, and the time will be on record. And the next inquiry will have both to refer to." She was quiet. He stood up. He was, she noted, not the person she had expected him to be based on what she knew about him. The 3-time champion whose record she had beaten by 4 minutes at Kurith, and by 11 minutes here, had just sat down on a plaza floor and agreed to file an inquiry on her behalf. She said, "Why?" He looked at her with the direct attention of someone who had spent 11 years at the top of a very demanding discipline and knew what it looked like when a standard had been met. "Because you ran this course better than I did," he said. "In this specific terrain, today, you were faster." He paused. "The records are supposed to say that." He turned to leave. "I'm going to make sure they eventually do." He walked back toward the Commission's presentation area. Quaim, who had been listening from 2 meters away and had the excellent quiet of someone who knew when not to talk, said, "Is he serious?" Dara looked at the annotated course map. "I think so," she said. She thought about what he had said. The records are supposed to say that. She thought about her father's distinction between training and just going out, between running in service of a goal and running to understand what running was. She had come to Verith to go out, to run the course she had found on the ground, in the terrain that the commission had decided she shouldn't race in. At the time of the race, she wasn't registered for. She had not come to make a point. She had come because the course was there, and she had spent 11 days learning to read it, and it would have been. In some sense she couldn't quite articulate, but that her father would have understood immediately, wrong not to run it. The point, such as it was, had followed from that. It usually did. Quaim offered her more food, and she took it, and they sat in the plaza until the awards ceremony was over. And then they went to find something to eat that wasn't field rations. And the Commission's monitoring system continued to log the unregistered time in its records, where it would remain, accurate and unresolved, until the inquiry found it. The Commission's formal response to Sorenvel's inquiry took 8 months. The response, when it came, revised the human participation ban. Not eliminated it. Revised it to a set of specific course condition requirements that human competitors were required to satisfy before registration. Requirements that were based on the actual environmental conditions rather than on a blanket species exclusion. The requirements were achievable. Dara met them in 3 weeks. She registered for the following season's Kurith Invitational as the first officially sanctioned human Class A circuit competitor. She ran it 2 minutes faster than her first unofficial time. The course record was updated. The Commission's recording system noted, in the field that tracked record history, that the record had been preceded by an unofficial completion that had held the de facto course standard for 14 months. This notation was, by the Commission's documentation standards, unusual. Records were records. Unofficial completions were not typically noted in record history. The course design director had added the notation manually. He had argued, when the Commission's documentation manager had questioned it, that the record's history was incomplete without it. The complete history was, here is the time, here is who said it, and here is the context that explains why it took 14 months to become official. The documentation manager had agreed, eventually, that incomplete history was worse than unusual notation. The notation stayed.